Hi, I'm George Latimer, and I'm Democratic candidate for Westchester County Executive. I currently serve in the New York State Senate, and I've been asked, as other candidates have, a series of questions which I want to answer, and you'll be in a position to compare the comments of each of us who are running for county executive. The first question posed is, why are you running? A standard question that all of us answer all the time. A little bit about my personal background. I grew up in Mount Vernon. I'm the son of blue-collar workers. My dad was a maintenance man. My mom worked in a factory. I went to public high school in Mount Vernon, went on to graduate from Fordham and NYU. So I come out of a very blue-collar background. I have lived in portions of this county that would be considered poor, working class and poor. I now live in a successful community in Rye, very close to Playland, and have raised my daughter in that environment. So I've had a chance to see the alpha and the omega of Westchester County. I'm running because I think this county and all of its diversity needs to be protected better than we protected it in the last 8 years. I'm afraid that over those last 8 years, we have had, in the running of Westchester County government, a conservative ideological approach to governance that holds certain principles more important than the actual needs of individual people. And as we answer very specific questions, I'll try to highlight that. But I think what it comes down to is understanding that Westchester County works because we have people of all different type in this county, of all different levels of affluence and all different ethnic backgrounds, in different job careers, and we need all of that to make it work well. It's not enough for us to focus just on a few people and try to deliver some agenda that ideologically somebody thinks is important. So I'm running to offer a choice to the incumbent. I'm here to offer what I think is an intelligent, pragmatic way to look at government, and I hope over the course of the campaign you'll have a chance to see me answering questions, and then you'll make a judgment of whether I represent the best choice for the future in Westchester County over the next 4 years. The second question, what are your plans for taxes, property sales and otherwise, and spending over the next 4 years in county government? I think the important thing to start with is we are in right now a fiscal mess in Westchester County. It may not be apparent to the average individual, but over the last 8 years, in quest of trying to make an effort to deal with property taxes, this government has borrowed for expenses that it should not borrow for. It's gone into our reserve funds, which is like going into your savings account, to take money out to pay for expenses of everyday nature. We have overestimated revenues in areas just to make the numbers balance, leaving us mid-year budget gaps. We've had one-shot deals that have helped balance the budget, but one-shot deals that can't be repeated. And if you put it into personal context, that would be like budgeting your own home, borrowing to do something like painting your house, which would have to be repainted long before you ever pay off the borrowing that you've been involved in. It's the same thing. When you go into the reserve fund, it's like going into your savings account to pay your monthly rent. That might work for a month or two, but it's not going to work for the long term. You have a structural imbalance, and you need to address that. And when you have a one-shot deal where you sell off the airport and you make a killing in 1 year, that's like hocking something in your house, a grandfather clock or something of value, which gives you a one-year boost of revenue, but that does not solve the problem in the long run. So if I'm county executive, I intend to take a pragmatic approach. And the first thing I'm going to do is ask the state controller to come in and bring his people in and do a full audit of our finances to make sure we know exactly where we stand. Not a political audit done by people with an agenda, but impartially done by the state of New York. Then I'm going to ask a blue ribbon commission of top-level business people, academics, people in the community as a group to sit down and help us think through what the priorities should be over the next 4 years. So when we look at taxation policy, I have no plans to increase property taxes. Sales taxes are unlikely to increase. They need state approval for it. But at the same time, I'm not going to make commitments until I really understand just how deep this budget problem is that we have. Because what I want to avoid is going to a fiscal review board where they come in and take over your finances. That's happened in Nassau. That's happened in Yonkers years ago. And it's happened in New York City. I don't want that to happen in Westchester. And you don't want it to happen either, because that affects your property values and the quality of life in the community that you live in. The third question, what do I consider the biggest mistake any local government has made during the last 10 years? Without identifying communities, I think there's some communities that have been unwilling to look at the future trend lines of their communities and have been unwilling to adjust to the needs of housing, the needs of transportation, and many times it comes from playing to an election or an electorate in the short term that doesn't want to see outsiders coming in and doesn't want to be threatened by the changes that are happening in the society. But the changes are with us every day, and you have to adapt to those changes. I'll give you one example. When you go on the main streets of Westchester County, the stores that exist in our downtowns, or the shopping malls, or the strip malls, you're seeing something different happening out there. More and more people are buying things online. They're buying it without ever leaving their home, and they're not out walking around in the malls and the downtown areas. So we have to be able to adjust and sort of show a creativity and a future thinking about how we're going to both handle our local businesses, our small businesses, and how we project the amount of sales tax we're going to receive. And I think the biggest mistake is not understanding those trend lines and not planning for the future. The next question is the companion to that. What do you consider the smartest thing that any local government has done in the last 10 years? And that would be the answer to that question, which is where governments have looked for revenue streams that do not involve property taxes or look for changing the delivery of services that winds up saving money. There's a number of communities that have combined services. Communities like Larchmont and Mamaroneck have worked together to combine their sanitation district and a number of other basic services. That is smart thinking for the future. There are some communities, Cortland is one and Mount Kisco is another, where they've looked to tap into county services in order to save money looking forward. And then communities like Rye Brook have been able to tap into a revenue stream of the visitors that come in through hotel occupancy revenue to offset having to raise local property taxes. The village of Rye Brook hasn't had to raise village taxes over the last 6-7 years because they had revenue. This is not burning furniture for firewood. This is actually delivering the same level of services. So the negative is not looking to the future and adjusting to change, and the positive is looking to the future and adjusting to change. That's the kind of county executive that I intend to be. Next question they ask is, what do I think about the property tax cap? Property tax cap has been in effect now for 6 years. I voted for its renewal most recently when it came up. It has an impact on local governments, which I think has made them more creative in how they're going to deal with issues. Some of those impacts are negative. I find that they're expanding the cost of parking in every parking lot that I go into. They're holding the hours later, and the fines are greater, and the costs are greater. But it has also forced some economic discipline on them. So what I would hope would happen in the future with the property tax cap is that the state legislature would look and assess and adjust that. There are needs and reasons to make modifications to the tax cap, and we should do that. But we should do it as part of a debate, and we should do it intelligently. And once again, we shouldn't do it ideologically. It shouldn't be, I support it forever, I oppose it forever. Let's see how we can constrain our local property taxes, but at the same time not starve ourselves so that we can't provide the police, the fire, the sanitation services that people look for. And I think that's a major reason why they're here in Westchester County. Next issue is, what is my position on privatizing and development on county-owned property? The airport is given as one example. First of all, it's a case-by-case analysis. I think you have to look at the nature of the service or the property to determine whether it's wise or not. The most prominent case of privatization that's being offered out there is the changes that the county executive has proposed on Westchester County Airport. I think it's a bad idea, and I don't think we should do it. When we sell off the airport, which is in essence what we're doing when we give full control of it to a private sector entity, that entity is going to be able over the long haul to capture revenue. They wouldn't do it unless it was profitable for them. But in the process of doing that and we losing control over it, they're in a position to expand the airport, to grow the amount of flights that come in and grow the amount of traffic that comes in and out of the airport. And that is not in the best interest of the Westchester residents who live in and around the airport, which encompasses 4 and 5 different communities, not just a small piece of Westchester. The great beneficiary of the expansion of the airport will be our neighbors in Connecticut, because that's where the growth market for the airport is, all the way up to Trumbull, Connecticut, and so forth, when people who would otherwise go to LaGuardia will say, hey, we can go to LaGuardia North. Let's go to the one in Westchester County. So I think it's a bad idea to privatize it. I don't think privatization intrinsically is a bad idea, but I think the Board of Legislators, which I served on as a member of and served as chairman of the Board of Legislators, they ought to put together some principles for what would be effective privatization. And then when a county executive wants to look at privatizing a service, there's a dialogue between the executive and the legislature, and it's not just imposed in a budget and done just to try to make all of the numbers line up, which is why we receive this privatization effort on the county airport. Once again, I think it's a bad idea to privatize the county airport. Privatization as a concept is worth discussing, depending on the case. There's a question here about vines that are killing trees along our highways. How would we protect those trees, and what will we do to, in general, deal with green issues? Certainly, I think we need to protect the trees that we have in the county. It is a hallmark of Westchester County that we are a green county. When any of your friends come from New York City up to Westchester, the first thing they remark is the trees and the lovely environment, and also the healthful environmental circumstances of having trees that help us with oxygen. We need to protect land. We need to take green activities to protect our water resources as well. Certainly along the highway, we have to go out and do a better job of maintenance along our highways and our byways. And we have a responsibility to fix the roads themselves, not just the trees alongside of the roads. And I think that's the problem when you worry about the cost of everything, but not the value of things. You wind up pushing things off and pushing things off. In your own home, if you see a leak in the ceiling, you know that you can't let it go beyond a certain point. You might be able to avoid it for a certain period of time, but at some point in time, that leak will cause a problem with the ceiling and the walls, and you'll have to rip the whole thing out at much greater expense. So I think whether it's vines on trees or the way we maintain our roads or our sidewalks, we ought to be more advanced thinking, and we ought to do the type of repair and maintenance that we need to do up front. Next question asks is how important is a AAA bond rating? It's very important. A AAA bond rating by the major rating agencies allows us to borrow money, which we do routinely, every government does, borrowing that money at the lowest possible interest rates. What a AAA bond rating says is that Wall Street has confidence in Westchester County's stability. We were just downgraded by Moody's within the last year and a half and so. And that is a bad sign for a county like Westchester County. That's what happens to counties before they start to head into fiscal problems and fiscal review boards that come into place. And that downgrade, and we get put on watch by other rating agencies, that's a sign that we're making political decisions, not good financial decisions. So I think it's very important that we have a AAA bond rating. My position on closing Indian Point. The decision to close Indian Point came from the corporation itself, Entergy. They made a decision based on the money that it would take to maintain and upgrade the plant to current standards and how much money you're getting for generation of electricity from nuclear power, which is much more expensive in the current day than natural gas, that they could not function profitably. So they, along with the regulatory interest of the governor in closing the plant, created a deal that closes the plant within 4 years with a potential extension of 8 years. The county's role in this is to try to help buffer the impacts with the town of Cortland, the village of Buchanan, the Hendrick Hudson School District, and the county itself from a financial standpoint, and to try to repurpose as many of those people who are going to be remaining in our community in terms of jobs and the economic local interest. It will take the county to work cooperatively with the state, and so far, this county executive has continued his war with the governor. They have political ambition, and they'll probably, as they ran against each other in 2014, will do so again in 2018. But that's not what's in the best interest of Westchester, nor in this case, the people who live around Indian Point. The county has to help shape a plan for how we're going to react to the aftermath of the closing and let that be an intelligent, practical plan. In closing, just for the last few minutes, you have a decision to make. There's a primary that's held on September 12th. There's a general election on November 7th. You need to look at whether or not we're making intelligent decisions for 4 years that have impact for the next 20 years, or if we're going to do something right here and now to satisfy how we feel at this moment. And history has taught us that every time we made a short-term decision, we looked back over the long haul and regretted it. I intend, given my 20 years experience in business and my experience in government at the local level, the county level, and the state level, to bring a pragmatic sense to Westchester County management. I'm George Latimer. I'm Democratic candidate for county executive, and I hope to have your support on primary day and on election day.